Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be. It's your friend Joseph Craven here on the 40 Minute of Hell Fast Break, August 24th. Man, it's hard to believe that August is almost over, but it's a wonderful, wonderful thing because it means that we are just that much closer to basketball season. Yeah, football season starts up in about a week, and I'm excited. I will probably actually today go to a high school football game at the school that I work at just because it'd be nice to go watch something and support my students and all of that. But even after football begins again, and in spite of the vast amount of Madden playing that I've been doing over the past week, I still miss basketball. And it can't come back soon enough. Especially considering right now we're still in that strange area where there's not a huge amount of basketball news to discuss. There's just a few things going on, but there's some pretty important stuff, especially this week. And that's why we have, of course, the Fast Break, which is our Friday news recap show. And that's why I'm here right now. One of the first things that happened this week that generated some headlines was that, well, Kobe Bryant had a birthday. Happy birthday, Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Regardless of how you actually feel about the man, you may have not liked him as a player. You may not necessarily even care for him much right now, and that's fine. I personally, I've not really watched his short films or his, the show on HBO. Is it HBO? No, it's not even HBO. It's like ESPN Plus or some nonsense. In which he, breaks down game film, all that sort of stuff. It seems fascinating and to be very interesting to watch something that came straight from the mind of one of the most intelligent players of all time, one of the guys who, studied the game a lot. Like, we praise LeBron James for his ability, this season to, study the ebb and flow of the game to know when he can kind of rest a little bit while on the court, when he doesn't need to sprint, that sort of thing. Kobe Bryant was that type of, intellectual level as well, and it showed. The only knock I think about, Kobe Bryant's game and his is that his competitiveness was a double-edged sword for him. Obviously, the competitiveness is what pushed him to be one of the greatest of all time. It pushed him to be the guy who never accepted a loss. Obviously you accept a loss. You don't become a top tier, champion and winner if you don't accept loss, learn from it, grow from it. But he was such a fiery competitor that he never ever had the mentality of, someone else might get the best of me. He was going to try to do whatever he could to lay down the law to prove that he was the guy to beat for so long in the NBA. Probably, if we're honest, the biggest knock against Kobe Bryant was that he came along too soon. We weren't ready for the next Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan was still playing. We always said that we were. Everyone's like, oh, well, who's going to be the next star? Like, I don't know why it is that we're so obsessed with that, how we can't even appreciate Michael Jordan when he was playing. We can't even appreciate LeBron James now that he's playing because we're always trying to compare and contrast and kind of be like, who's the next or who's the greatest ever? And it's kind of a ridiculous thing. But Kobe Bryant, it really did him a disservice because we had so many players for years where it's like, well, Michael Jordan's been here since the mid-'80s. All throughout the 90s, we're like, this guy who just got drafted, he's the next Michael Jordan. This guy who just did this, he's the next Michael Jordan. It was anyone from Isaiah Ryder to Grant Hill was supposed to be the next Michael Jordan. And then we actually got the next Michael Jordan in Kobe Bryant. Play style, size, skill set, and that mentality, that killer mentality that basically said, I am going to do whatever I need to do to win this game. Whether it's score 81 points, whether it's play such lockdown defense that you can't get past me, whatever it is that I need to do to win this game, that's what I'm going to do. And I think it did Kobe a disservice that he fell into the later years of Michael Jordan's career so that people weren't really ready because we kind of forgotten, what we had, or we get grown accustomed to what the two guard was supposed to be at that point in time. The luster had kind of worn off. If he came into the league right now, if we had Kobe Bryant pop it in the league right now after we've had a much different definition of what the two guard is, then it might be different. I mean, look at Devin Booker, for example. Devin Booker is one of the first true two guard stars that we've really had in a little while, because the league has shifted towards stretch fours, point forwards, and hot shooting, scoring point guards. So to have someone who is a slightly taller, scoring off guard, now we can appreciate it again. And I think it did Kobe Bryant a disservice that he showed up too soon to Michael Jordan and right before LeBron James. And that's interesting to even say that it did someone a disservice, considering he's one of the greatest to ever have played the game. But I think that might be one of the reasons why I didn't always care much for him as a player. Maybe it's just because I didn't like the Lakers that much. They were the top dogs. They were the Golden State Warriors of the day. But either way, I've really come to appreciate his play style, and especially the never really accept loss, don't just roll over and die and accept loss sort of mentality is impressive. What I didn't always like was him referring to himself as the Mamba, and the Mamba mentality. It's a little hokey. And he didn't exactly age very well. Same thing with Michael Jordan, kind of prolonging their careers a little bit, maybe longer than they should have. Jordan, I think, handled it with a little bit more grace, but Kobe Bryant did not, basking in the multi-million-dollar deals that the Lakers were going to give him when he was, too injured to really play. Which is why, I think that Vince Carter has quite honestly aged the best out of that slew of hyper-athletic 6'6", off guards. Michael Jordan, for example, and Kobe Bryant and Vince Carter. Carter didn't have as dynamic a career in his prime, but he's aged significantly better, and I respect that. But Kobe Bryant, one of the legends of the game, absolute beast of a player who will be respected for years and years and years to come. Happy birthday to you, Kobe. The NBA Competition Committee, I almost said competitive committee, that's not what they're called. The NBA's Competition Committee has recommended a particular amount of rule changes leading into the 2018-19 season that are expected to pass and go into effect. These rule changes in particular include a simplification of the clear path foul rule, expanding the definition of hostile act for purposes of triggering replay. So a couple of rule changes that are in particular about clarifying a few things. But the most significant out of this is a reset of the shot clock to only 14 seconds after an offensive rebound. This is huge because, of course, if you get an offensive rebound right now, the shot clock resets to the full amount, the 24 seconds. And now you only have 14. So it changes your entire game plan when it comes to how to handle offensive rebounds. In particular, late game situations come to mind when you're trying to hold on to a lead. So you try to get an offensive rebound and soak up the rest of the clock. This will, dwindle down on a little bit of the time wasting that tends to go on at the end of a late game situation, the end of a game. And this is a pretty significant rule change. It's not often we get these massive, significant rule changes in the NBA, but this is one of those because it's going to change directly the flow of the game. We'll see whether or not this, once it actually gets put into effect, is a good idea or not. I mean, at this point in time, the NBA doesn't just throw rule changes out there willy-nilly, so it seems like they've done enough research and experimented enough where they feel like this is the right decision. And so I like it. I think it'll be very interesting. I think it'll be a good way of changing the flow of games late in a game. And this is an area, one of the many areas in which the NBA is just leaps and bounds ahead of college basketball. College basketball has been trying to figure out how to make itself more watchable for years now. They've been trying so hard to figure out what it is that they could possibly do to, I don't know, just make the game a little less awkward, a little less, slow. They complain a lot about low scoring games. And so instead of trying to adapt to some of the NBA rules that really help out pace of play, the NCAA has just kind of changed a lot of the way that referees call fouls, which is just nonsensical in a lot of ways because you've got you got these guys coming out here, uh, completely unable to play defense now, and the attempt at increasing the pace of play has basically just meant that more fouls get called, so there's more free throw shooting, and which disrupts the pace of play, of course. But that's their way of making the games, I don't know, higher scoring or something. The NCAA has been tinkering with the game in all the wrong ways and are kind of destroying college basketball in a lot of ways because college basketball is largely unwatchable. You can't just jump into any matchup in college basketball and be entertained by it anymore because most of the time you end up with these mid-major squads or whatever that are being hindered by the NCAA's rules about how fouls are called, and it's just you can't just tune into any game and be entertained anymore in college basketball. And the NCAA hasn't quite figured that out yet. The NBA, the NBA has just overall general interesting pace of play, and yet every now and then you get a game that is just entirely unwatchable. But most of the time, it's because it's a blowout victory for a team that's just significantly better or is just clicking on all cylinders and the other team is not. So I like seeing the NBA always tinker with what they could do to make the game flow and play just a little bit better. I think college needs to pay just a little bit more attention to what the NBA is doing to try to repair. If you're complaining about losing ratings to the NBA, then don't damage your own sport anymore to try to catch up. Like, actually do the research and figure out what would work. For the record, I don't really know what it is that would really work to fix the sport. Because, if you're being investigated by the FBI, clearly there's a lot that's going on that is not ideal as the sport goes. But you can't just get in here every year and emphasize different fouls and expect that to fix the pace, the play. It makes no sense. I'm going to move on now because we need to pay respects to one of my personal favorite players to have watched in my lifetime. Man who is considering retirement after 16 years in the NBA, Manu Ginobli. If he does retire, then he can look back on an amazing career that put him in 2 All-Star games, 2 times in the All-NBA, made him the 07 to 08 Sixth Man of the Year, and really revitalized the sixth man position. 4-time NBA champ, All-Rookie when he arrived back in 2002, 2003. I have loved Manu Ginobili since he showed up in the NBA. There was something about this strange, bizarre... first of all, Argentinian basketball, like, we were blown away by that. But this strange, bizarre style of play that he brought in, where it always looked like controlled chaos. It was fascinating to see how a man who could go at like 130 miles an hour in just all kinds of directions. It seemed like I've been obsessed with Manu Ginobili. I've been really, really riveted by Manu Ginobili for a while, and it makes me think that he doesn't get enough credit for how good he's actually been over the years. So I'm going to talk about some of my most underrated or overlooked players of the past 30 years. This is by no means a definitive list, of course, but this is a list of guys that I think don't get enough credit for what they were able to piece together in their careers. Some of them due to injury, some of them just due to what was asked of them, but guys that were really, really key players, guys that scored, maybe 13 to 15 points a game, not pushing the 20 to 25 points a game type of mark, not your superstars, but guys that were important. And Manu is maybe the most overlooked stud player on this list. So I'm going to give you about 5 guys of the past 30 years in my lifetime that I've really enjoyed that I think are some of the more underrated players. And we're going to look at Manu to start things out here. Emmanuel Ginobili, of course, popped into the NBA back in 2002, 2003. 6'5", 6'6", somewhere in that range. Left-handed, quick shooting guard. Like I said, he had this strange ability to just kind of alter direction whenever he needed to score, to just kind of play with this intensity and this, I don't know. It's just, he was this whirlwind. He was it almost made you wish that he was from, Australia, New Zealand or something. You could call him, the Tasmanian devil type of thing because of his ability to just kind of, it seemed like spin around in circles, change direction constantly, be a little tornado. He reminded me of Taz, the Tasmanian devil, the cartoon from the 90s. That's where that reference came from. I didn't mean to be so awkward about that. But Manu Ginobili arrived. He was this hyper athletic. I mean, when he was young, that dude could fly. He could dunk on people whenever he wanted to. He could shoot past people. He could, go around people whenever he wanted to. Just really athletic type of guy. That 2007-2008 season comes around after he's established himself as the third of the San Antonio Big Three. Behind Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, you had Manu Ginobili, who really was the guy that brought them together and established the Spurs as being the team in the West as, after Shaq had left the Lakers. So if you had one of the best teams in the West, one of their glue players was Manu Ginobili. And it was that 2007-2008 season that stands out when he won the Sixth Man of the Year award, because basically basketball genius Greg Popovich showed up and was like, hey, look, Manu, you're one of our star players, but I want you to be our star that comes off the bench because I think it will help us keep the rotation strong. That's what Oklahoma City kind of dreamed that maybe James Harden would be willing to do. James Harden, of course, being maybe the most similar style player to Manu Ginobili that we've had. Like, James Harden right now is Manu Ginobili in his prime, but American and in a starting position. So you kind of wonder if maybe Manu had been in a different sort of situation. Would he be the starter? Would he be the main guy? Would he be an MVP caliber type player like James Harden is right now? That's the type of skill set that Manu Ginobili had in his prime. And it's amazing to me that, I guess because he just always played in San Antonio and they just play such a team-centric style of play, or maybe the fact that for a good chunk of his career, at least the past like 10 years, he has really mainly been their spark off the bench type of player. It's so interesting to take a player in his prime who might be your most skilled offensive player, maybe your most skilled scorer, and to say, hey man, I need you to come off the bench for us. And then for him to go, okay, I can accept that. I could see where you're going and I can accept it. I know it wasn't easy for him, but once he accepted it, then he comes out, he wins Sixth Man of the Year, and then goes on to be the type of guy that wins multiple championships. So if he were to retire right now, then he would have a great career to look back on. For his career, 13.3 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists. Oh man, I hadn't even really talked about his passing ability. And we don't have time to, but go ahead, do yourself a favor, and just Google Manu Ginobili passes, and just watch a compilation of the stupid passes he pulled off. What a, I love it. I love it. He basically could have been, if not for Tony Parker, he could have been their point guard. And it would have been a perfect fit. Manu Ginobili doesn't get enough credit for helping Popovich build the Spurs into one of the most significant and most well-run organizations of the past 20 years. Another guy that I think is on my list here of one of the more underrated players of the past 30 years or so, and really a lot of these guys are going to be more so in the past 20 years because, mostly in the 90s is what I'm trying to say, is Larry Johnson, Grandmama himself, the undersized but very powerful power forward or small forward about 6'6" or 6'7", 250 pounds or so. The man out of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and the first overall pick in the 1991 draft, wearing number 2. The thing about Larry Johnson that, of course, always stands out is that he had such a promising start, and then the injuries started to happen. You had this guy here who could fly. He was 6'6", 6'7", and just more muscular than just about anyone else on the court. But he had this strange skill set of being able to back somebody down, but also be able to shoot over them or get past them. He was a little bit of a Charles Barkley-esque type of power forward, in that he wasn't really a true post player. He played in the post primarily because of his size. He was a good rebounder and a good post scorer. But because of his height and the overall just athleticism, he also could move out to the wing. And, you didn't see too many of those guys in the, 80s and 90s. You had a few guys that could do that very well. And he was one of those, and people really thought that he was going to be the next big thing because of it. But it was those injuries that really started to hold him back. And there's 2 guys on this list that injuries got in the way of letting us see really who they absolutely could have been if they had stayed healthy the entirety of their careers. And old LJ here is one of those dudes. 16.2 points a game and 7.5 rebounds a game with 3.3 assists per game over the course of his career. But sadly, it was a career that has only spanned about 707 games played, and a career that ended when he was 31 years old. He comes out of UNLV in 91, the age of 22. He goes to the Charlotte Hornets, the young Hornets. He teams up with Alonzo Mourning, another one of the guys I think is very underrated, but is not on my list. He comes in here. He averages 19.2 points a game to start off his career, his rookie season. He's the rookie of the year. He's a all-rookie. He goes off to his 23rd year of age. That's a weird way of saying it. I don't know why I did it like that. He starts all 82 games. He plays 40 minutes a game. He averages 22 points a game and 10 rebounds, on his way to being an all-NBA performer in the 92-93 season. The next year, though, he only plays in 51 games. And that's where the injuries started getting his way, because he was not necessarily a skilled rebounder. Like Moses Malone was a skilled rebounder because he was not super athletic necessarily, but he had a big old butt, and he would just force people out of the way. At least that's what experts said about him. He just knew how to use his girth. Larry Johnson wasn't like that. Larry Johnson out-athleticed people in order to get rebounds. And once those injuries started to happen, he never averaged double-digit rebounds again. He averaged 11 rebounds a game his rookie year and 10.5 his second year in the league. But after that, it went down to 8, to 7, or to 8.8, then 7.2, 8.4. And then after he left Charlotte and went to the New York Knicks, I mean, he never really averaged anything more than 5 to 5.8 rebounds a game. About 5.5 rebounds a game for the rest of his career. Those scoring totals also fluctuating quite a bit. His final season in Charlotte, he did average 20.5 points a game. But once he goes to New York, it's only 12. And after that is when he never plays a full season again. 94, 95, 95, 96, he plays in 81 games. But then the rest of his career with the New York Knicks, he never plays more than 76 games, and for the most part, never really plays more than 70 games. And it starts having less and less productive minutes. Playing about 33 to 34 minutes a game, but never really on the level that you saw early on in Charlotte. And it really was injuries that got in his way. But before that happened, I mean, even before he moved to New York and really started to struggle in his late 20s, those early 20s were good, man. I mean, 20 and 8 as an undersized power forward is not too bad, even with all the injuries in there. But sadly, Larry Johnson, there's a reason there were so many comparisons when Anthony Bennett was coming out to Larry Johnson. I mean, they both went to UNLV. They were both about 6'7" and 250 pounds and all. But Larry Johnson had some of the same issues that Anthony Bennett did as well, in terms of keeping his weight in check and all motivation maybe sometimes. But Larry Johnson, good enough to be just an absolute star, and we never really got to see that potential on a consistent basis throughout his entire career. But hey, Larry Johnson made it into Space Jam as one of the guys who, got his ability stolen. So, I mean, if you're that good, that's saying something. The other guy on the list that really had his career completely derailed due to injuries, and because of that, we never really got to see him be what he could have been, and we never really got to see him be, appreciated for everything that he could do, was 7'3" Lithuanian Zydrunas Ilgauskas. The 20th overall pick in the 1996 draft. That was a decent draft, I guess, looking back on it. Goes on to be a 97 and 98 all-rookie performer for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He started in 81 of their games that season, played in 82. 13.9 points a game, 8.8 rebounds a game. And he had this nimbleness to him that was so weird for a dude that was 7'3". In a lot of ways, he was a little bit of a predecessor to Kristaps Porzingis, of course. He had good footwork. He was, of course, huge. And he didn't necessarily come into the league with a three-point shot like Kristaps has, but he developed it. But he had to develop it because in that second season, 98 to 99, he had that foot injury. And that stupid foot injury ended up derailing his entire career. He started to have these nagging. It was the same sort of injuries that, is really what cut down on Yao Ming's playing career as well. He had the reoccurring foot issue. And it's a shame that some of the big men in the league had to suffer through that and derail what we really could have seen out of them, because I would love to have seen Yao Ming play healthy and competitively for an entire, long NBA career. But Big Z was one of those dudes who had the similar issues. He was starting off the season so well. His points average had bumped up. His rebounding average was staying at about that 8.8 rebound mark, but he only makes it 5 games into the season before that injury derails everything. 99 to 2000, he doesn't play at all. It's a slow comeback. Only 24 games in the 2000-2001 season, 62 in 01-02, back to a full 81 games in 02 and 03. And he starts averaging 17 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, 15 points a game, 03-04, 8 rebounds, 16.9 points a game, 04-05, 8.6 rebounds. And at that point in time, obviously, he didn't have to be the guy that Cleveland tried to build a team around because LeBron James was there. And that, helped him out quite a bit, obviously. But Big Z became just an absolute legend in Cleveland, one of the most favorite players on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Fans love Big Z for everything that he did for them in his career. But it's a career that gets overlooked because he was one of the most skilled and just, technically proficient big men that the NBA had at the time, and was 7'3". So he was just this giant, very skilled player that injuries stole like the prime from. And it just was an absolute shame because he had to change the way he played entirely due to that nagging foot injury. And he was able to get obviously quite a few very, very productive years out of it. But it's just a shame because, starting in 04-05, he didn't really play complete seasons. He didn't really play more than 30 minutes a game. And we never got to see what exactly he could have done if he'd been able to stay on a pace where he played a significant amount of minutes. I mean, if you're able to average 17 points a game in 33 minutes, 17 points and 8.5 rebounds, just imagine if you're able to really stay in there for 35 plus minutes. Oh, man. I miss Big Z. He was just a gentle giant of a player, and one of the most technically skilled offensive guys that gets overlooked. 2 more guys on the list, and we're going to speed through them just a little bit here. We're going to go with the Matrix Shawn Marion, and I'm not necessarily going to talk a huge amount about Shawn Marion because he does get a decent amount of credit for everything he was able to do in his career. 6'7", 220 pounds, quick enough strong enough, athletic enough to successfully guard all 5 positions on the court. 4-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, All-Rookie in the 99-2000 season, and champion in 2010 and 11 with the Mavericks. And not only that, but being probably one of the key players in that run. The Mavericks able to take an NBA championship away from the up-and-coming Big Three in Miami because they played such hard-nosed defense. And you saw that through Shawn Marion and through Tyson Chandler. So those guys are able to play such hard-nosed defense to help the Mavericks then get the ball back and play that half-court set that they like to play, going through Dirk. J.J. Barea, of all people, was a key player in that championship run. I don't know if you remember that. But Shawn Marion had this incredible longevity in his career, and a lot of that comes down to his versatility. He came in to the league. He ends up playing in Phoenix for several seasons and becomes a key player and a star in that Phoenix fast-paced offense that went down and tried to, score within basically, 10 seconds or less or whatever it was. That insane, very quick offense is where he excelled. He could handle the ball well enough. He was absolutely unstoppable in the open court. It was just going to try to dunk on anyone and then defend people. He was this weird player who, obviously, about the jump shot. So you say what you will about that. He was decent enough with it. I mean, over the course of his career, he got, a little bit better with it whenever he wasn't forcing it, at least. But he was this weird player in that he wasn't a 3-and-D type of player like we have in the league so much right now. He was a fast break and D type of guy. Great defense, and could just, as soon as he got in the open court, could just go. And he was versatile enough where there were several seasons, wherever he went, Phoenix, Miami, Dallas, where he played a significant amount of time actually at the power forward position and was defending guys that were much taller than him, but he was just a good enough defender and athletic enough and lengthy enough and, that he could do that very successfully. So one of the best defenders that the league has had in the past, 20 to 30 years, and a guy that was able to do enough with his career and was such a respected defender and just a wrecking ball type of guy that he was able to, play for since 21 to 36. He was able to play for some 15 years or so and do most of it very, very efficiently. In fact, even when he was a 35-year-old in Dallas in 2013 to 14, he was still averaging 10 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game. Not too bad. For his career, 15.2 points and 8.7 rebounds per game. And people tend to forget just how good a player Shawn Marion actually was, because in his prime, you did not want to see him in the open court. And the last of these 5 guys that I'm going to talk about who gets overlooked quite a bit these days is the guy who maybe bounced around the most out of all of the ones mentioned here, but still one of my favorites. Another extremely versatile power forward / small forward, the legendary Detlef Schrempf. Wherever he went, he was admired, he was loved. For his career, 13.9 points, 6.2 rebounds, 3.4 assists per game. Tall enough at that 6'9", 6'10", to play in the post. Skilled enough to play out on the wing, depending on what team, what the team asked of him, where he needed to go. Sometimes a consistent starter, sometimes a 6th man. He did win the 6th Man of the Year award twice, but he also was a 3-time All-Star, and in the 94-95 season was an All-NBA player. Drafted by Dallas, he goes and he plays about 3.5 years in Dallas before moving to Indiana, where he has some of his most successful years and becomes a Pacers legend. At the age of 30, Indiana sends him out to Seattle, is where he goes now, and ends up having the best years of his career. Oddly enough, being a guy that, moving back out to small forward from power forward here. But Seattle being a part of those Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp teams, being one of the glue guys that leads to the success there, being the guy that complements Shawn Kemp so well by being basically a power forward that could step it out to the wing, hit the 3-point shot, while Sean Kemp focuses on being the power forward who can out muscle people and can jump over people and can run past people, especially on fast breaks. What an interesting lineup to have, basically two 6'10" power forward / small forwards that were neither of them were true big men in their skill set. Those Seattle Supersonics teams of the mid-90s were kind of ahead of their time in understanding positionless basketball, before positionless basketball was really trendy. And really, really enjoyed those teams. They were some of my favorite teams growing up. I still have a bit of a Seattle Supersonics obsession. I actually have my mid-90s Supersonics cap, just my hat, sitting right here next to me as I record. But Detlef Schrempf, for his career, was able to really be whatever teams wanted him to be. Either a power forward who could step it out to the wing as a predecessor to the stretch forwards, or as an kind of oversized, as far as height goes, small forward who was more of a perimeter scorer. Whatever you needed him to be, he was willing to be it. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's pretty much beloved wherever he went. In particular, Indiana and Seattle are the two teams that, or the two cities that just absolutely love him so much. I mean, he got reoccurring guest spots on Parks and Recreation set in Indiana. He's got songs by Seattle-based bands such as Band of Horses named after him. Detlef Schrempf, one of the guys that doesn't get enough credit for just how good he was, how likable he was. He had at one point in the 94-95 season where he was, I believe, an all-NBA player. He had a year where he averaged 19.2 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game, 3.8 assists per game. And then what does he do to follow that up? Well, the next several years, he actually bumps up his assist numbers to 4.5. So you got a small forward who's averaging 4.5 assists per game while still getting about in that 15 to 17 points and 6 to 7 rebounds a game. Man, I just like his skill set. He's very, very useful to play with in NBA 2K, by the way. There we go. Those are 5 of my most overlooked or underrated players of the past 30 years. Who are some of the guys that you don't think get enough credit in the NBA in your lifetime? Tweet at me. You could find me, of course, at 40 Minutes Pod on Twitter. That is the number 40 Minutes Pod, 40 Minutes Pod. Or, my own personal, the Joseph Craven, if you just really want to tweet directly at me. That's fine too, I guess. But I want to know who it is that you think doesn't get enough credit. This has been The Fast Break. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. We're getting closer and closer to the return of basketball. I can't wait. NBA 2K, of course, coming out just in about 2 weeks. So that's exciting. But we're almost there. Hang in there, everyone. This has been The Fast Break on Friday, August 24th. I love you all, and I'll see you next time.